All right, so we're diving deep into Dante Alighieri today, and wow, you found some interesting stuff. Excerpts from Inferno, a Wikipedia article, even information about artists who were inspired by Dante's work. So we're really trying to understand how his exile, how it basically turned him from this politician into, well, a literary giant, someone whose work is, I mean, still important to us all these centuries later.
Yeah, it really makes you think about how one single event can completely change a person's life. But not only that, how it can also, like, change culture,
Yeah.
for centuries even. And Dante's exile, I mean, it wasn't just some personal thing, it really did kind of spark this whole, like, amazing literary achievement. One of the most important pieces of Western literature, actually.
Right, the Divine Comedy.
Mhm.
Okay, but to really get it, we have to go back in time,
Yeah.
back to 13th century Florence. Now, I
Uh,
always think about the Renaissance when I think about Florence, but this was way before all that, right?
Oh, yeah, totally different time. Forget about all that beauty and peace of the Renaissance. Florence, when Dante was around, was a city that was, like, constantly on edge. Think of it like this. You had these two groups, the Black Guelphs and the White Guelphs. They were always fighting for power. Basically, these powerful families creating chaos everywhere they went.
And Dante wasn't just watching all this go down. He was right there in the middle of it.
Exactly. Dante was a white Guelph and super involved in Florentine politics. And that involvement is kind of what brought him down in the end.
How so?
Well, he was accused of corruption by those Black Guelphs. They hit him with this huge fine and said, okay, you're exiled. Can you imagine being kicked out of your home, your whole city, for something you might not have even done? That had to be crushing.
And the timing. I mean, talk about bad timing. He was actually in Rome when the Black Guelphs took over Florence.
Ugh, talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
I know, right? And that basically meant he couldn't go back. And those first 2 years of exile, they turned into a lifetime. But here's the interesting thing. This forced separation from Florence, it kind of, like, changed Dante in a good way.
Oh, absolutely. It's like being away from all that political stuff, it kind of freed up his mind. He had the time to really get into philosophy and literature and theology, all the stuff he needed to write the Divine Comedy.
Okay, so let's follow Dante a bit on his journey, shall we? We know he went to Verona, then to Sarzana, which is in Liguria, and then there's this woman, Gantuca. She was in Lucca and apparently was really kind to Dante. He even mentions her in Purgatorio.
Yeah. It's kind of a good reminder that even in exile, even when things are really tough, just having someone be kind to you can be such a comfort, such an inspiration. Dante might have been away from Florence physically, but he wasn't completely alone.
Right. And then there are these stories about Dante visiting Paris, maybe even Oxford, although honestly, it doesn't seem like there's much proof for those trips.
Yeah, it kind of seems like people who admired him later on just like wanted to believe he did all these amazing things, right? Because his writing was so impressive. I mean, his knowledge, it blew people away. And so they kind of imagined him traveling around to all these great intellectual centers in Europe, which I kind of get. You want to believe someone that brilliant did all these awesome things.
Even without those European adventures, it's clear Dante really grew intellectually during his exile. I mean, his writing from that time is so deep, so complex. And then in 1310, there was like maybe a little bit of hope when Emperor Henry VII came to Italy. And Dante, he saw that as his chance to like shake things up politically, maybe bring back the glory of the Holy Roman Empire. And you never know, even free Florence from those Black Guelphs.
Dante really thought Henry VIII was the answer, and his writings from this time show a whole new side of him. He was passionate, even vengeful, no more Mr. Calm observer of Florentine politics. He was letting out all his anger, pouring out his desire for justice.
And he wrote all these letters to Henry VII, to all these Italian princes, practically demanding they destroy the Black Guelphs. I mean, he even called down divine wrath on his own city. You can almost feel the anger in his writing. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, you really get to see a raw, unfiltered Dante, and it's all driven by this pain of exile, this burning desire to make things right.
But I think you can guess his hopes didn't really work out. I mean, Henry VIII did take back Florence for a little while, but Dante still couldn't go back. It seems like even the other white Guelphs, they weren't so happy about all those fiery words he'd written.
It's a tough situation, right? The very things that made him such a great writer, being so passionate and uncompromising, were the things keeping him away from home. Imagine that. Being so close to everything you miss, but being kept out by your own words.
So heartbreaking. But even with all this going on, Dante finished Inferno and Purgatorio.
And And you can't help but see the connection, right, between his own struggles and what the Divine Comedy is all about, all that stuff about justice and punishment and the soul's journey. It all reflects what Dante was going through in exile. It's like he took all his pain and turned it into this huge exploration of what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And that's something that still speaks to people even now.
It really is. It's like his personal struggles let him see these big universal truths about life, about death, about how people search for meaning. And that's what makes it so relatable even all these centuries later.
Totally. It's incredible that he could take all that pain and frustration and turn it into something so profound, something that still resonates with people today.
Yeah. So even though he died in exile in 1321, that wasn't the end of his story.
Yeah.
The Divine Comedy, it's been translated into so many languages. It's inspired artists and writers and thinkers all over the world. But before we get into all that, let's talk about one artist in particular, Gustave Doré. He really brought Dante's Inferno to life in a way that, I mean, visually, it's just incredible.
Oh, yeah, Doré. He was a master at showing the dramatic, even the grotesque, but also the beauty of it all. His engravings for the Divine Comedy, especially those Inferno ones, they're unforgettable.
So for those of us who might not know about Doré, can you give us a little background? Who was he and what made him the perfect artist to tackle Dante?
Well, Doré was a French artist from the 19th century, and he was insanely productive. I mean, he was known for these incredibly detailed, dramatic engravings, and he illustrated all kinds of works, from Rabelais to the Bible. But I think it's his work on the Divine Comedy, especially Inferno, that really made him famous.
And there's a reason for that, right? It wasn't just his skills, it was something more. It was like he was able to really get the emotion, the intensity of how Dante saw hell. He wasn't afraid to go to those dark places.
Exactly. Doré didn't just illustrate the scenes, he brought them to life. You know, he gave them this darkness, this like grandeur that really reflects what Dante wrote. He took you on this visual journey through the 9 circles of hell, and to see, like, really confront all those horrors and torments that Dante describes so vividly.
I'll say, his engravings are definitely not for the easily scared. They can be pretty disturbing, but they show how much artistic vision he had, how he could translate Dante's words into these images that stay with you. You really feel that despair, that agony, just the heaviness of all that sin weighing down on the souls in Dante's hell.
And, you know, in a way, Doré actually helped more people understand Dante because, let's be real, not everyone's going to read the original Italian text. But those images, they're like a universal language. They go beyond any barriers of language or time.
It's amazing how a work written so long ago can still inspire such powerful art. It really shows how powerful and important Dante's vision was, and still is. And Doré is just one example. There are so many other artists, writers, even musicians who have been inspired by Dante. It's like his work just keeps inspiring creativity over and over.
For sure. Just think about how many times Inferno alone has been adapted and reimagined, from paintings and sculptures to operas and movies, even video games. It's crazy.
It's kind of mind-blowing. So what is it about Dante that still captures our imagination, even across all these different cultures and centuries? What makes his work so timeless, so relevant even today?
That's a good one. I think it's because he was dealing with these really big questions, you know, these universal truths that we all think about, like what is good, what is evil, what does justice mean, what is the point of life and death, and like how do we find redemption? Those questions matter to people no matter when they lived.
And he definitely doesn't shy away from the dark side of things. He really makes you confront it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Dante doesn't make it easy for you. His writing can be challenging, even kind of disturbing sometimes. But I think that's what makes it so powerful, you know? He's willing to explore everything about being human. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly. He doesn't try to sugarcoat anything.
And we can't forget about his language skills. I mean, he practically invented the Italian literary language, right?
He did. Before Dante, Italian literature was basically a bunch of different dialects. But when he wrote the Divine Comedy, he created a unified Italian literary language.
Wow, that's a pretty huge impact. A poet, a political activist,
Yeah.
a linguistic innovator.
He was truly a Renaissance man before the Renaissance even happened.
It's interesting, you know, we started out talking about his exile as this terrible punishment, this awful thing that happened. But maybe it actually let him get away from all the everyday politics and focus on something much bigger, something that would last longer than him, longer than his own time.
Yeah, there is something kind of ironic about that, right? exile, which was meant to be a punishment, actually ended up being what pushed him to create this amazing literary work. It forced him to really think about what he believed, what was important to him, and in the end, it helped him create something truly timeless.
It makes you think. If Dante hadn't been exiled, would we even have the Divine Comedy? Would he have had that spark, that motivation, that, I don't know, that sheer will to create such a huge work?
We'll never know for sure, obviously, but I think it's pretty clear that his exile was a big part of what shaped his art. It gave him this unique perspective, a depth of experience that made his writing so powerful, so real.
It's like a reminder that sometimes the things we think are holding us back, the setbacks and obstacles, can actually be chances to grow and change. It's about finding the strength to use those challenges, turn them into something amazing, something that makes a real difference.
And Dante's legacy shows us that, right? He took all his pain, his anger, that longing he felt for justice, and he turned it into this work of art that people are still moved by, still inspired by, even centuries later.
So if you ever find yourself feeling lost, like you're in your own personal exile, whether it's because of a job you lost, a relationship that ended, a creative block, or just feeling like you don't belong anywhere, remember Dante. Remember that you can take that experience and turn it into something meaningful, something that helps you grow, helps you evolve.
And who knows, maybe you'll even create your own masterpiece in the process.
I love that. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into Dante's world. I hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as I did. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, isn't it? How those Black Gulfs, the ones who exiled Dante, well, now they're only really remembered because of his work.
It's true. It's like they accidentally gave him the perfect situation to create his masterpiece. And speaking of masterpieces, you mentioned earlier how Inferno has been reinterpreted through all these different art forms. Can you give us some examples? I'd love to see how artists have actually visualized Dante's, vision of hell over the years.
Oh, tons of examples. Well, that classic image of Satan, stuck in ice at the bottom of hell? That's everywhere, and it's mostly thanks to Doré's engravings. But there are so many other artists who've been inspired by the Divine Comedy, each one with their own take on Dante's world.
So it wasn't just Doré then. Who else tackled Dante? I'm picturing those big dramatic paintings, lots of fire and brimstone and all that.
Yeah, there's plenty of that. Like William Blake, that English romantic poet and painter. His illustrations of the Divine Comedy are amazing. They're full of energy and these mystical symbols, that really capture the feeling that you're in another world, just like in Dante's journey. And then there's Salvador Dali. Now, his illustrations, well, they're very Dali.
I can only imagine. Melting clocks and distorted figures wandering around in hell.
Uh-huh. Yeah, something like that. Dali's illustrations are full of these bizarre images, like dreamlike landscapes, totally different from Doré's style, which is very realistic. But they both make you feel that same mix of wonder and unease that you get from the Divine Comedy.
So cool to see how all these different artistic styles have interpreted Dante. It really shows you how universal his themes are.
Definitely. And it's not just visual art either. Dante's been a huge influence on music, too. Franz Liszt, the Hungarian composer, was a huge fan of the Divine Comedy. He actually wrote a whole symphony inspired by it, capturing the drama and intensity of Dante's journey through music.
Wow, so he turned Dante's words into music. That's wild. Do you think he was thinking about a particular canto or scene?
He composed pieces based on all three parts of the Divine Comedy, actually. Inferno, Purgatorio, even Paradiso. He was obviously captivated by the whole thing, Dante's entire vision. But one of his most famous pieces, the Dante Sonata, it focuses on the love story between Dante and Beatrice, which is, this recurring theme throughout the Divine Comedy.
Beatrice, Dante's muse.
Yeah.
I guess people have always loved a good love story.
Absolutely. And the way Liszt portrays their love in the music is just incredible. These soaring melodies, these moments where you can just feel the longing. It's like he's giving a voice to Dante's own emotions, all that yearning and heartbreak.
It's funny. We often think of Dante as this serious, intense guy, the ultimate guide through hell. But he clearly had this passionate, romantic side too, this capacity for love and devotion.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's important to remember he was a real person with real emotions. Love, loss, betrayal, anger, hope, despair, all of it. And all of it comes through in his writing, which is what makes the Divine Comedy so rich and complex,
That's probably why it still speaks to us today. We see ourselves in his struggles, his triumphs, his flaws.
Exactly. It's like a reminder that even the greatest works of literature are still at their core about what it means to be human, with all the messiness and complications that come with it. But Dante's legacy, it goes way beyond just art and music. He even influenced how we think about language and literature as a whole.
Okay, now I'm really curious. We talk about how he basically created the Italian literary language,
Yeah.
but what other impact did he have on, like, the world of words?
Well, first of all, the Divine Comedy is considered one of the most important works in all of Western literature. It shaped epic poetry, and you can see its influence on so many writers from Chaucer to Milton to T.S. Eliot.
So he's kind of like the grandfather of Western literature.
He's definitely earned his place in the Literary Hall of Fame, that's for sure. But it goes deeper than that. He actually changed how we think about language itself. See, back then, Latin was the language for serious writing, especially in academia and religion. It's the language of authority, scholarship, all that. But Dante chose to write the Divine Comedy in the vernacular, the language that everyday people spoke. That was a pretty radical move for the time.
Why was it so radical? Weren't people speaking Italian back then?
Oh, yeah, people spoke it. But when it came to writing, like important stuff, Latin was king. But Dante, he believed that Italian, his language, the language of his heart, could express deep ideas and complex emotions just as well as Latin could.
So he was kind of a rebel, in a way.
He definitely challenged how things were done, and by doing that, he opened the door for other writers to use their own languages. His choice to write in Italian actually helped give the language more status, and it helped it develop as a literary language.
It makes you think about how language can shape our culture and identity.
Hmm.
Dante wasn't just writing a poem, he was making a statement,
Yeah.
you know,
Huh.
about the value of his language, his culture.
Exactly. He was taking Italian and saying, hey, this language is worthy of expressing the deepest, most important human experiences. And that idea, that legacy, it continues today.
It really is incredible how much impact one work of literature can have. Dante's story shows us that words have this power to last, and that art can go beyond time and space.
It reminds us that even when things are tough, even when we feel exiled or alone, we can still create something beautiful and meaningful, something that will inspire others long after we're gone.
And that's a beautiful thought to hold on to. But before we wrap up, I have one more question.
Right.
We've explored so much about Dante, his world, his exile, his impact. But what does all this mean for us, for the people listening? What can we actually take away from Dante's journey and apply to our own lives?
That's a really important question. I think one of the most powerful things about Dante's story is that it shows us that even when things are really hard, even when we feel lost or alone, whether it's actually being exiled or just feeling that way, we still have this ability to create something meaningful.
So it's like taking those tough experiences, like feeling exiled, and turning them into something good, something
Yeah.
that makes us more creative.
Exactly. For Dante, his exile was definitely a painful thing, but it's also what pushed him to write his best work. It gave him space from all the chaos of everyday life, forced him to really think about what he believed in, and that's how he tapped into this incredible creativity that he might not have found otherwise.
So maybe exile or any kind of challenge can actually be freeing in a way,
Yeah.
because it makes us look at things differently, re-examine our priorities, and maybe even find our true voice.
You got it. It's about embracing those moments when things get shaken up, when we're pushed outside our comfort zones. Because it's often in those moments that we discover how strong we really are, how resilient we can be.
Makes you wonder, right? If Dante had never been exiled, would we even have the Divine Comedy? Would he have found that inspiration, that drive to create such a powerful, important work?
It's hard to say for sure, obviously, but I do think his exile played a huge role in shaping how he saw the world, his artistic vision. It gave him a perspective that most people don't have, and it's what makes his writing so real, so powerful.
It's a good reminder that sometimes what we see as a setback, an obstacle, can actually be a chance to grow, to change for the better. It's about finding that strength inside yourself to take those challenges and create something beautiful, something that leaves a mark on the world.
And Dante's legacy is proof of that. He took his pain, his anger, his longing for justice, and turned it all into this incredible work of art that still touches people, still inspires them, even centuries later.
That's amazing. So if you're ever feeling lost, facing your own kind of exile, whether it's losing a job, a relationship ending, hitting a wall creatively, or just feeling out of place, think about Dante. Remember that you have the power to turn that experience into something meaningful, something that helps you grow, helps you become who you're meant to be.
And hey, maybe you'll even create your own masterpiece along the way. You never know.
I love that. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey through Dante's world. I hope you found it as fascinating and thought-provoking as I did. And until next time, Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.